To some people, Disney gets a reputation for being a consumerist, capitalistic organization. It is a company, after all. Disney's beloved characters are just trying to take our money. And I'm not going to lie, the company does get a good amount of my money. But the truth is, Mickey is more of a company symbol and not a pitchman just trying to sell us products. I mean, he's trying to sell us Disney, but not other people's products. Well, there was that one time in the 50s where that angular Mickey tried to sell us all a Nash Rambler, but Walt didn't like it and he shut that down. He didn't want Disney characters peddling other companies' wares. Today, Disney characters have strict guidelines of how they can be used by other companies in advertisements. If a license is even approved, the characters can't use the product that they're advertising. They can't talk about the product, or they can't even think about the product. The characters are not even to be aware of the selling message of the product or the company that the advertisement is for. Mickey will not promote your product. He is not selling. But that's okay because there are plenty of other non-Disney characters out there who have been willing to sell plenty of products. And anyway, sometimes those corporate shill advertising characters can become just as beloved as our favorite Disney characters. The 1980s was full of them. It was a golden age for beloved pitch characters like the California Raisins, Max Headroom, Chester Cheetah, the 7-Up Spot, the Noid, avoid the Noid. And sometimes those characters became even more beloved than Mickey Mouse. You know what I mean, Vern? Hey, this is Synergy Loves Company, where we explore how Disney connects to everything so you can connect to Disney when you can't be at the parks. I'm Eric, and I just got back from a trip to Nashville. And on previous episodes, whenever I have visited somewhere, traveled to a different city, I usually like to point out the Disney connections to that place. And there are quite a few for Nashville. I could have gone on with any sort of, country music, country bears, Miley Cyrus, but there was one that really caught my eye. It stopped me right in my tracks. A character who had a whirlwind fame in the 1980s and early 90s, and he started out in Nashville, Tennessee. And his fame caught the attention of the Walt Disney Company when he, just for a moment, outshined Mickey Mouse. That character is Jim Varney's Ernest P. Worrell. The character of Ernest goes back to Nashville, Tennessee, and the advertising company Carden and Cherry. Nashville is Music City, the country music capital of the world. And centers for media like this tend to attract the full service of businesses aligned to media and promotion. So in 1972, Jerry Carden and John Cherry decided that this would be the place to start their shared namesake advertising company. Both Carden and Cherry had some experience in media, advertising, and a long history in Nashville. John Cherry, a Nashville native, had studied commercial art at Ringling School of Art and Design in Sarasota, Florida, which he turned into a career working in advertising. Jerry Carden began his career in television at Nashville's WSM TV station. The Nashville market wasn't New York or Los Angeles, so there wasn't as much competition from the big advertising agencies, but Nashville wasn't New York or LA, so clients also tended to be more local to Tennessee and the neighboring states. But that would all change when they met a new partner for advertising, Kentucky-born actor Jim Varney. As a young boy, Jim's family noticed that he was able to memorize poems and entire sections of books very quickly, and that he had a knack for imitating his favorite cartoon characters on TV. By the time he was a teenager, he took on roles in high school productions and in local community theater. The acting bug had bit, and he couldn't get enough of being on stage, and he was really good at it. And while he was still a teen, he got his first professional stage acting jobs, including a show at the now defunct Opryland theme park in Nashville. In his 20s, he studied Shakespeare in Virginia, and Jim Varney was shaping up to be a well-rounded, serious actor. He could do anything. So in the late 1970s, he started work as a TV actor. He showed up on some variety shows like Johnny Cash and Friends and sitcoms like Alice, but his big break came in the form of a television commercial. While Jim was working at Opryland theme park in Nashville, his girlfriend at the time asked him to accompany her to an audition at the Carden and Cherry ad agency. When he showed up, they thought he had an interesting look, and they asked him to read for a part of a drill sergeant character that they had been working on casting. Nashville's Carden and Cherry hired Jim Varney for the part of Sergeant Glory. Jim's Sergeant Glory character was used in a commercial to sell dairy products for Purity Dairies based in Nashville. In the ad, Sergeant Glory is talking to some ladies off screen. He tells them that they have to be the best. He talks them up like a drill sergeant would. And then at the end of the commercial, we see that the ladies are actually cows who are giving their milk to Purity Dairy. It's kind of like he plays it real serious, and then we get the gag payoff at the end. This character was a pretty big hit, enough so that Carden and Cherry asked Jim back to do another character, this one completely different from the drill sergeant. In 1980, when Beach Bend Amusement Park in Bowling Green, Kentucky approached Carden and Cherry to make a commercial about their new renovations for the upcoming season, the ad execs quickly realized there wasn't much they could show because the park was under construction. Instead, they switched it up and they decided to use more of a pitchman character talking directly to the camera. Ernest P. Worrell was developed by Jim Varney and John Cherry. The P, by the way, is for power tools. The idea was that he would be a gruff but lovable know-it-all, sounding like he had a mouthful of marbles with words just falling out. The character of Ernest dressed in his signature denim vest and baseball hat and would talk about Beach Bend Park. And Ernest talked directly to the camera in a one-sided conversation with someone named Vern. The commercial was a big hit and set the standard for what an Ernest commercial would be. When Purity Dairy saw the local commercial for Beach Bend, they recognized their Sergeant Glory and they asked Carden and Cherry if they could get a dairy commercial starring Jim Varney as Ernest. They knew that Ernest had mass appeal and he would surely get the attention of kids, the demographic the dairy company wanted to reach. In the United States, dairy companies are regional and rarely compete with each other, so Purity's local Ernest commercial was syndicated to other dairy suppliers across the country. And soon enough, major national brands and international brands were calling up Carden and Cherry for one of those sweet, sweet Ernest commercials. Ernest started out in local commercials, but he was also featured in commercials for gas companies, Coca-Cola brands like Mellow Yellow and Sprite, the United Way, Chex Cereal, and Taco John's nationwide. By 1985, Ernest was pretty much a household known character around the United States, and Ernest was asked to attend the iconic Indianapolis 500 race in Indianapolis. He would also take part in the kickoff parade event at the beginning of the Indy 500 festivities. The theme for the kickoff event that year was The Wonderful World of Disney. You heard that right. You knew it was coming. This is a Disney show. Michael Eisner arranged to have Disney be part of the Indy 500 because he knew he and Frank Wells were just brought on board to help bolster the Disney brand in the 1980s after years of struggling to capture the magic the company had under Walt Disney. To show you how much the Disney brand was flailing at this time, during the Disney-themed parade, Ernest P. Worrell received a warmer welcome and bigger crowd response than even the Grand Marshal of the Disney-themed parade, Mickey Mouse. Michael Eisner, he noticed. He didn't even know who this Ernest character was, but he knew this character was someone to watch. And you know what they say? If you can't beat them, sign them to a movie deal. And of course, that's what Michael Eisner did. Eisner signed Jim Varney and Carden and Cherry and their character Ernest to a multi-movie deal for Touchstone Pictures. In 1987, the first of these movies would be realized as Ernest Goes to Camp. Ernest Goes to Camp is a family comedy starring Jim Varney as Ernest, as a bumbling but well-meaning handyman at Camp Kikiki who dreams of becoming a camp counselor. When he's finally given the chance to mentor a group of troubled juvenile delinquents, he struggles at first but eventually wins them over with his goofy charm. However, when a greedy mining company threatens to take over the camp, Ernest and the kids must band together to save it. The film is packed with slapstick humor, heartwarming moments, and Ernest's signature catchphrases. The movie was filmed in Nashville and all around Tennessee, with most of the camp scenes filmed at Montgomery State Park in Burns, Tennessee, just outside the Nashville area. It was made for just under $4 million and brought in 6 times that in box office revenue. Ernest was a hit, a big hit on the big screen. And what's weird is after this big hit movie, Ernest had a TV show on CBS called Hey Vern, It's Ernest. And it wasn't affiliated with Disney. You would have thought that Disney would have snapped up the TV rights as well as the movie rights, but they didn't. They let Carden Cherry do their own thing with CBS. Hey Vern, It's Ernest was made by John Cherry's production company, M-Shell, in collaboration with DIC, D-I-C, a company that was known for its Saturday morning cartoons. Another strange thing is that Disney would one day own DIC, the company that made Hey Vern, It's Ernest, but not when it was producing the show. That seems like a great future episode of Synergy Loves Company. Are you subscribed? I'll give you a moment to click subscribe, so if you get an episode like that in the future, you won't miss it. But let's get back to the Ernest movies. The following year, in 1988, that same year that Ernest launched his TV show, he also showed up in his most successful movie ever for Disney's Touchstone, Ernest Saves Christmas. And if you couldn't tell, it's a holiday comedy featuring Ernest. This time, Ernest finds himself helping none other than Santa Claus, who has arrived in Florida to pass on his role to a new, unsuspecting successor. When Santa's plans go awry, Ernest teams up with a rebellious teenage runaway to save Christmas and ensure the world doesn't wake up to a holiday without Santa. It's full of wacky antics, heartfelt moments, and Ernest's signature goofy charm. The film is a fun and festive adventure. Now again, this movie filmed a little in Nashville, but it also filmed so much all around Orlando, Florida, including places like the Orlando train station, the Orlando Science Center, and because they were in Florida, you know, they had to film some of it at Disney's MGM Studios that was slated to open as a theme park the next year. Disney wasn't going to let them make a movie in Orlando and not film at MGM Studios. So at this point, we're halfway through the Disney Touchstone Ernest films, and I think it's time to get into some of the real synergy with Disney and Ernest. In 1989, Disneyland was opening its brand new Splash Mountain attraction in Critter Country just outside of New Orleans Square. And to synergize the launch of the attraction, Michael Eisner, of course, needed a Wonderful World of Disney special all about Splash Mountain. And in 1989, Ernest Goes to Splash Mountain premiered on TV. In the special, Ernest gets selected to be the first ever Splastronaut, or the first person to ride Splash Mountain. The whole premise of this special is a mockumentary that follows his preparation and training for Ernest's historic run on Splash Mountain. Ernest didn't single-handedly secure the popularity of Splash Mountain, but Disney must have thought that he had been a great TV special guest because he got invited to come back and make an appearance on Disneyland's 35th anniversary TV special in 1990. In this one, though, he has a shorter role, but it was a star-studded event featuring Muppets, Star Wars' C-3PO, DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince, and don't forget the top-billed star, Tony Danza. But that was all at Disneyland. Let's go back over to the Orlando parks, because Ernest around this time was being incorporated into attractions. Not just on TV either. Ernest made a cameo in Cranium Command's pre-show. The bit goes like this. When Buzzy is getting prepared to command his own cranium, he's shown a picture of Albert Einstein as an example of a successfully run brain, and then the failure example is Ernest. In the late 80s and early 90s, Ernest was in the pop culture zeitgeist to the point where he could be used right alongside Albert Einstein to get an audience response. Everyone knew who he was. In 1990, the same year Disneyland was celebrating its 35th anniversary, the third Disney Touchstone Ernest film dropped with Ernest Goes to Jail. Once again, it's a slapstick comedy with Ernest taking on the role of a bumbling janitor who's working at a bank and unexpectedly gets summoned for jury duty. Through a case of mistaken identity, he ends up switching places with a hardened criminal who looks just like him. While the real criminal takes over Ernest's life on the outside, Ernest finds himself stuck in prison, struggling to escape and prove his innocence. With his usual mix of goofy antics and over-the-top physical comedy and endearing charm, Ernest must outwit the bad guys and clear his name. Ernest Goes to Jail left the Florida locale and headed back to the original Tennessee setting, and it filmed all around Nashville, home turf for Ernest and Carden and Cherry. All right, for a while in this episode now, I have been referring to Ernest, but not Jim Varney. And that's kind of what happened to Jim. People knew him as Ernest and only Ernest. The character got so big that people started to recognize Jim as Ernest and expected him to always be in character. And like that was his real life, that he was actually Ernest. And that could take a toll on an actor. His performance in Ernest Goes to Jail was actually one of his first opportunities in a while to show his acting range, because he plays both Ernest and the polar opposite doppelganger villain character in the film. John Cherry and Jim Varney would only get to do one more Ernest film with Disney Touchstone, Ernest Scared Stupid. Released in 1991, this time Ernest accidentally unleashes an ancient evil troll in his small town just before Halloween. The troll, which turns children into wooden dolls, begins wreaking havoc, and it's up to Ernest, along with a group of kids and an eccentric old woman played by Eartha Kitt, to stop the creature before it's too late. Once again, it's packed with goofy humor, but this time it's got spooky but family-friendly frights and Ernest's trademark antics. The film is kind of a cult favorite for fans of fun Halloween movies. Ernest Scared Stupid once again returned to film mostly around Nashville. After Ernest Scared Stupid, Jim Varney was ready to take on some non-Ernest roles, and Disney had had enough of the character, deciding not to renew the contract for more movies. At the beginning, with Ernest Goes to Camp, the budget was low compared to the box office returns being so great. But as the movies continued on, their budgets crept up, and after Ernest Saved Christmas, the box office numbers started to decline. Even though Jim went on to do other roles like Jed Clampett in Beverly Hillbillies for 20th Century Fox, and even some more serious roles, he wasn't completely done with Ernest. John Cherry's M-Shell Productions continued to independently make Ernest films, with Jim Varney going into the future, but these would be more direct-to-video releases, titles like Ernest Rides Again, Ernest Goes to Africa, and Slam Dunk Ernest. What I find interesting about this is even though Jim Varney had become so intertwined with the Ernest character, he didn't totally write it off when he went for other roles. Many other actors would have and actually have in the past totally distanced themselves from a character like this if they wanted to be known for something more than just one character, a single note. Jim Varney understood the important place that the character had played in his career, and he continued to play Ernest for the rest of his life. In looking for those other roles, Jim did work with Disney again. In 1995, he voiced Slinky Dog in Disney Pixar's Toy Story. I do love me some Ernest, but I really think that Slinky Dog is probably my favorite Jim Varney character. He also reprised the role of Slinky Dog in Toy Story 2. In addition to Slinky Dog, he voiced another character in the Hercules TV series that spun off from the theatrical film in 1998. And probably the most Disney project on his filmography list is Atlantis, The Lost Empire. Jim Varney gave his voice to the character of Jebediah Cookie Farnsworth. On Milo's quest to find Atlantis aboard the Ulysses submarine, Cookie is, well, the cook on board, and he's part of the crew and along for that journey and adventure. Atlantis wrapped up voice production in 2000 for a 2001 release date. Unfortunately, after recording his voice for the project, but before he would get a chance to see Atlantis premiere in theaters, Jim Varney passed away due to his ongoing battle with lung cancer. Atlantis: The Lost Empire would be Jim Varney's last Disney project and his very last theatrical release. The movie even featured a dedication to Jim at the end. And for me, I'll always remember watching Ernest movies in the early 90s with my best friend Mike. We were the perfect age for these movies to just hit the right way. So when I connected Ernest to Disney while I was prepping for my trip to Nashville, I couldn't pass up this opportunity to find Ernest and Jim Varney's connections to Disney. And if you want to stream some Ernest on Disney Plus, I got some news for you. The only one streaming right now is Ernest Saves Christmas, and it seems that they only like to put one Ernest on at a time, usually just the holiday ones. Early on, they only had Ernest Scared Stupid. That was it. It was around Halloween time. I guess that's great. And now they only got Ernest Saves Christmas. They probably put it up right before Christmas. Come on, Disney Plus, you got to give us some more Ernest. As for Synergy Loves Company, of course, I've got more Disney connections coming right up. So make sure that you are subscribed so you don't miss a thing. Thanks for joining me on this look into Ernest and Jim Varney and Disney. And until next time, keep discovering the magic in everything.